Snow hammered against the windows of a Wyoming bar. Inside, silence. 4 Navy SEALs crouched low, rifles leveled at men in black suits. At the center stood a woman the town thought was only a bartender, now with a stolen pistol in her hand and firelight cutting across her scar. She was someone else entirely. Across the room, Director Randall Graves gave the order, "Take her." But Rebecca Hale didn't flinch. She revealed a small hard drive, its metal glinting in the firelight. "If I fall tonight," she said, voice calm, "the world will learn everything about Project Helix." The air froze. Guns ready, 1 second from chaos. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The iron lantern glowed like a beacon in the frozen night. Snow clung to the rooftops of Ashford, Wyoming, and the wind pushed against the wooden doors with a steady howl. Inside, the warmth of firelight, laughter, and clinking glasses painted a different world. Behind the counter, Rebecca Hale moved like she had always belonged there. 39 years old, calm eyes, dark hair tied back in a loose knot. To the locals, she was the woman who knew everyone's drink before they asked. The bartender who never pressed for details. 8 years she had been here, and still, no one knew where she came from. The town didn't pry, and she never offered. To them, she was simply Becca, the one who poured whiskey with a steady hand and listened with a patience that never ran out. But anyone watching closely might notice the tiny breaks in the illusion, the faint crescent scar that appeared when her collar shifted, the way her gaze flicked to the door every time it opened, the subtle shift of her shoulders whenever a stranger entered. The bar had its regular cast of characters, each adding to the nightly play. Mayor Calvin Brooks sat in his corner booth, telling his fishing stories like sermons. At the bar, old Martha Callahan nursed her gin with eyes sharp as broken glass, cataloging every word and glance. 2 ranchers argued about cattle prices near the dartboard. A group of teenagers, freshly 21, celebrated their first legal beers, laughing too loud and clinking bottles as if proving adulthood. It was the rhythm of Ashford, and Rebecca moved inside it like a ghost that nobody questioned. The sheriff arrived late, boots stamping off snow, uniform faded by years of Wyoming winters. Daniel Mercer always asked for club soda, and Rebecca slid it toward him without a word. He nodded his thanks, eyes sweeping the room the same way hers did, as if he, too, lived by quiet vigilance. Ashford was small, and its gossip often felt larger than life. Tonight's talk centered on strange convoys driving past Iron Ridge. Some swore they'd seen camouflage trucks moving through the forest. Others whispered about helicopters landing on frozen clearings after midnight. "Special forces," one logger muttered, lowering his voice as if the snow outside could carry secrets. "Training up there. My cousin swears he saw men with night vision gear." His words drew laughter, but Rebecca's grip on the glass in her hand tightened almost imperceptibly. She set the drink down, steady as ever, and turned away. To anyone else, she looked the same, calm, practical, invisible. Inside, though, the old rhythm she had buried for years had already begun to stir. Her past lived in fragments that she never allowed to surface. A desert sky lit with tracers, voices in her earpiece calling her Commander Hale, the chaos of Operation Falcon's Veil, and the silence after. Ashford had been her refuge, her disguise, and her cage. The door opened again, dragging a blast of icy air into the bar. A group of hunters stomped inside, snow clinging to their beards and jackets. Rebecca scanned them in a blink, then returned to the taps. No threat, just cold, tired men searching for heat and beer. Hours passed, the rhythm steady, like so many nights before. She laughed softly at the mayor's exaggerated tale, kept Martha's glass filled, and ignored the slurred questions from Desmond, the town's drunk philosopher. It was a life ordinary enough to feel safe. And then, everything shifted. The door creaked wide once more, and the air in the iron lantern seemed to thin. 4 men stepped inside, moving with a precision the town had never seen. Their clothes were civilian, but nothing about them looked ordinary. Their eyes swept the bar in quick, practiced arcs. Their postures told of endless hours under weight and fire. Even before the sheriff straightened in his seat, Rebecca knew exactly what they were. Military. Operator, wolves walking into a room of sheep. Conversations faltered. A few locals went quiet, sensing something in the air. Rebecca's hand kept polishing the glass, but her pulse had already shifted into another rhythm measured. Ready. She lowered the glass, reached for a bottle, and told herself to breathe. The tallest of the 4 stood at the front, his shoulders squared, his face carved by years of command. His gaze traveled across the room, brushing over the crowd, and then landed on her. He froze. Rebecca felt it instantly, the flicker of recognition. His lips parted slightly, eyes narrowing as though he were seeing a ghost. She turned away, busying herself with the shelf of bottles behind her. Her hand tightened on the counter's edge, but her face betrayed nothing. To the town, she was still the quiet bartender they trusted. But across the room, Commander Ethan Cole, once her junior officer in another lifetime, was staring at her like a man who had found the dead risen again. The iron lantern carried on with its noise, but for Rebecca, time had already shifted. The life she built here, the cover she had lived inside for 8 silent years, was no longer safe. Ashford's bartender had just been seen for what she truly was. Ethan Cole didn't move at first. He stood in the doorway, boots planted, eyes locked on the woman behind the bar. For a man who had fought in deserts and jungles, he looked like he had seen a ghost. Rebecca's hand stayed busy, sliding a pint down the counter toward a rancher. She gave no sign she had noticed him. Her shoulders stayed square, her voice steady when she called out another order. Cole stepped forward, the weight of recognition clear in his face. "Commander Hale," he said under his breath, the name cutting through the noise. No one else heard it, but Rebecca did. She turned slowly, her expression cool, as if he were a stranger. "You've got the wrong person," she said softly. Her eyes, however, didn't waver. Cole shook his head once, the disbelief sharp. "No, that scar on your right shoulder. 3 inches, crescent-shaped, Caracas, 2015. I was there when the shrapnel hit you." The room carried on as usual laughter, the scrape of chairs, the sound of pool balls colliding. But between them, silence stretched like wire. Rebecca set down the glass she was holding and lowered her gaze. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. "I think you've mistaken me." She turned away, reaching for another bottle, ending the moment as if it meant nothing. Cole leaned closer to the bar, his voice a whisper now. "They told us you were dead. They buried an empty casket at Annapolis. We grieved you, and now you're here, pouring beer in Wyoming." She didn't answer. Instead, she refilled the mare's whiskey, nodded to Martha's gin, and carried on. But her jaw tightened, and that tiny movement told Cole everything. The other 3 men with him glanced between them, sensing the charge in the air. They were younger, fresh faces hardened by recent deployments, but none old enough to know her history. Only Cole understood. He pressed once more, low and urgent. "The rest of the team is gone. Kaplan, Ruiz, Monroe, Sanchez, every one of them. All dead, one by one. I thought I was the only one left." Rebecca's hand stilled for a fraction of a second. Her pulse kicked hard against her ribs, but she forced her breathing steady. To the bar. She was calm. Inside, a storm rose. She leaned forward just enough that he could hear. "You need to stop talking," she murmured. Then she moved down the counter, distance reestablished. The door pushed open again, letting in another gust of snow. Sheriff Daniel Mercer stepped in, stamping ice from his boots, his hat pulled low. He scanned the room, his usual habit, then caught Rebecca's eye. He moved close to the bar, lowering his voice. Couple of suits came asking about you, he said. Claimed they were defense, but their IDs didn't sit right. Rebecca kept her back turned, polishing a glass. What did you tell them? The truth, Mercer said simply. That you bought this place from Jack Carter 8 years ago and haven't left town since, which is all anyone knows. Her jaw flexed, but she gave a small nod. Mercer studied her face, as if weighing how much more he should ask. In the end, he said nothing. The night seemed to settle again, but Rebecca's instincts screamed louder than ever. Her cover had lasted years. Now it was unraveling in minutes. The younger SEALs ordered beers, their voices low. Cole stayed silent, his gaze steady, questions burning behind it. Rebecca kept moving, pretending the bar's routine still held. Then the sound of engines cut through the winter outside, tires crunching on ice, doors slamming. Headlights flared across the frosted windows, flooding the iron lantern in harsh white beams. The locals looked up, murmuring. Mercer's hand drifted near his sidearm. Rebecca set down her rag, every sense on edge. SUVs, black and unmarked, slid into position outside. Their engines idled, sending vibrations through the walls. The bar fell into a hush. The front door opened with quiet authority. A man stepped inside, silver hair combed neatly, his tailored suit hidden beneath a tactical vest. His presence was sharp, practiced, commanding. Director Randall Graves. He smiled as if greeting an old friend. His eyes scanned the bar, dismissing everyone until they landed on Rebecca. The smile deepened, but never touched his eyes. Well, he said, voice smooth as polished steel. Rebecca Hale, or should I say Commander Hale. I was told you died in Caracas. The words hit the room like a hammer. Cole stiffened, his men shifting beside him. Mercer straightened, his jaw clenching as his eyes darted to Rebecca. The bar, once filled with chatter, was suddenly silent. Even the crackle of the fire seemed to hold its breath. Rebecca stood still, her hands flat on the counter. For 8 years she had hidden in plain sight, her past buried under routine and silence. Now it stood before her, wearing a suit and smiling like the devil. The iron lantern had never been so quiet. Every local inside felt the weight of the strangers, the guns outside, and the man in the suit who spoke Rebecca's name. For the first time in years, the bar didn't feel like a refuge. Rebecca broke the silence. Everyone out, she said calmly, but the edge in her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. The townsfolk hesitated, then obeyed, moving quickly toward the door under Mercer's steady hand. Mayor Brooks muttered, Becca, what's going on? But Rebecca's look silenced him. Martha grabbed her coat with trembling fingers, eyes darting between Rebecca and the suited man. No one argued again. Within minutes, the room had emptied. Chairs scraped, boots thudded, and the front door closed behind the last civilian. The Iron Lantern was no longer a small-town bar. It had become a battleground. Now only Rebecca, Mercer, Ethan Cole, the 3 SEALs, and Gravesmen remained. Snowflakes swirled through the half-open doorway, carried in by the cold wind. The fire snapped loudly in the fireplace, mocking the silence. Graves clasped his hands behind his back. Take her, he ordered. His voice was smooth, confident, without hesitation. Instantly, the black-clad agents around him raised their rifles. The SEALs moved in unison, instinct taking over. In a single heartbeat, they spread out, taking cover behind overturned tables and the heavy oak bar. Cole's voice was sharp, commanding his men into position. Mercer's hand went to his pistol, but Rebecca raised a palm, halting him. Then, without a word, she stepped forward. Her body language shifted, shedding the disguise of a bartender like an old coat. In a blur, she closed the distance to the nearest agent. Her hand caught his rifle, twisting it sideways as her knee drove into his thigh. He crumpled, and before anyone could blink, she had stripped his sidearm free. The move was so fast, so precise, that even the SEALs paused for a fraction of a second. Cole's lips parted, a half-smile flickering. The woman he remembered was back, Rebecca leveled the pistol at Graves. "You killed my team in Caracas," she said flatly. Her voice was steel now, crisp and commanding. Nothing like the quiet bartender they thought they knew. Graves didn't flinch. "Your team discovered things that endangered national security," he replied coldly. They were silenced. Necessary sacrifices. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Project Helix isn't about national security. It's about profit. 12 American scientists murdered because they knew too much. Her words sliced through the room, each syllable an accusation. Graves allowed himself a small shrug. Sometimes power demands blood. That's the price of staying ahead in the world. You, of all people, should understand, Cole hissed under his breath, rage boiling in his tone. The seals shifted, weapons aimed tighter on the black-suited men. The air was seconds from exploding. Rebecca reached into her jacket with her free hand. The agents tensed, rifles jerking higher, but she moved slowly, deliberately. When her hand emerged, it wasn't with another weapon. She held a slim, battered external hard drive between two fingers. Its metallic surface caught the firelight. "I built a failsafe," she said evenly. "Every 10 days, if I don't reset a timer, this drive triggers a release. 31 news outlets across the globe get everything: research data, transaction records, names. All of it." Graves' jaw tightened, his mask of calm cracking for the first time. "You're bluffing." Rebecca's gaze was steady. "Try me. I had 8 days between discovery and the ambush. 8 days to prepare for my own death. I used every hour." Silence pressed in on the room. The only sound was the crackling fire and the wind howling outside. Even the armed agents shifted uneasily, their confidence faltering. Graves' hand twitched slightly at his side, a signal barely visible. The agents lifted their rifles higher, preparing to fire. Cole and his men mirrored the movement instantly, barrels locked onto targets. Rebecca raised her voice, sharper now. "You shoot me, you lose everything. The clock runs out. The world sees what you did." For a moment, Graves' face hardened with fury. His mouth opened, ready to give the order. And then the door burst open. Wind slammed into the bar as half a dozen figures stormed inside. Weapons drawn, dark jackets emblazoned with 3 letters glared in the firelight: FBI. At the front, a woman strode in with crisp authority. Her eyes swept the room, locking on Graves. "Director Randall Graves," she called, voice clear and cutting. "You're under investigation for treason. Put your weapon down." Rebecca exhaled once, low and controlled. The agents froze, caught between 2 chains of command. The SEALs didn't move an inch, their aim steady. Graves' lip curled, his arrogance fighting to stay intact. "This is a matter above your clearance. Assistant Director." The woman stepped closer, credentials flashing in her hand. "Lauren Keaton, FBI Counterintelligence." "And no, Director. This is exactly my clearance. Commander Hale's testimony was the final piece we needed." Graves's face blanched, the color draining from his skin. The tension in the room hung by a single thread. Keaton's voice sharpened. "Order your men to lower their weapons, or they'll face the same charges you do." Her agents spread out, weapons trained with unwavering focus. For the first time, Graves hesitated, his fingers flexed, his shoulders stiff. He looked at Rebecca, then at Cole, then at the rows of guns now aimed at him from every side. Finally, yet with a sharp exhale, he raised a hand. "Stand down," he said reluctantly. His agents obeyed, rifles lowering in sync, though their faces betrayed confusion and fear. Keaton gave a curt nod. "Secure them?" Her team surged forward, disarming the men in black and cuffing them swiftly. The bar filled with the sound of zip ties and shuffling boots. Graves remained in place, his wrists bound behind him. His silver hair gleamed under the dim lights, his smile gone, replaced with cold hatred. He locked eyes with Rebecca one last time. "This isn't over," he hissed. You have no idea how deep Helix runs. Rebecca holstered the captured pistol with smooth efficiency. Her shoulders stayed square, her expression unreadable. Then let's find out, she answered. The fire crackled, the wind roared, and the iron lantern stood as silent witness. A bar that had been nothing more than a hiding place was now the center of a storm that reached the highest levels of power. And for the first time in 8 years, Rebecca Hale no longer hid. She stood exactly where she was meant to be visible, unbroken and ready. The hearing room in Arlington felt colder than the winter outside. Fluorescent lights washed the walls a sterile white, flags motionless behind a long table of stern faces. Rebecca Hale took her seat, spine straight, eyes level. Across from her, Navy counsel arranged binders with color tabs. An analyst queued exhibits on a bank of screens that waited like blank verdicts. Assistant Director Lauren Keaton stood nearby, calm and unsparing. Proceed, the chair said, voice clipped. The first screen came alive with account numbers and transfer chains. Lines jumped across a world map, Belize to Zurich, Malta to the Seychelles, money laundering with clean, practiced loops. Rebecca spoke without flourish. She identified code names, handoffs, and timestamps. Each detail connected to something real: a lab keycard swipe, a midnight call, a signature under a purchase order that never should have existed. Keaton followed with bureau findings. Subpoenaed emails unrolled like wire, catching every name that thought it could slip through. Encrypted chat logs matched travel manifests to secret meetings in unregistered aircraft. Then came the numbers. Total value siphoned, the analyst said, $2.4 billion. The figure hung in the air, heavy enough to tilt the room. No one looked away from the screen. A second display replaced the first 12 photos of American scientists. Faces blurred for the record. Names read aloud. The dates beside them formed a pattern that had once been invisible and was now undeniable. A murmur rippled through the back row as the timeline locked into place. The chair raised a hand, restoring silence. Rebecca kept her tone even, never straining for effect. The facts did the work. She described Project Helix as it truly was not defense, but commerce, not deterrence, but arithmetic. The sales pitch had been written in clean English. The consequences were written in blood. Questions came hard and fast. Why had she stayed off the grid? How had she preserved chain of custody? What mechanism guaranteed release if someone lost her file? She answered in plain language, sparing nobody. The failsafe checks a remote clock. She said, if I miss the reset, a second server authenticates my key and transmits to 31 outlets simultaneously. It cannot be clawed back. The words landed like a locking bolt. Hours later, the chair closed a folder with a quiet snap. Commander Hale, he said, your testimony is complete. No applause followed. Nothing in this room honored applause. In the corridor, the day changed temperature. Marshals moved past in a line, escorting men who had once signed other people's orders. Rank braids gleamed above handcuffs. Shoes that had walked polished halls now scuffed tile. A vice admiral kept his eyes on the floor. An assistant secretary stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as cameras clicked behind the glass. Randall Graves passed last, expression empty and unblinking as a sealed door. Ethan Cole waited near the elevators, coat folded over one arm. Relief and grief lived in the same breath when he saw her. He didn't salute. Respect didn't need ceremony here. We thought you were gone, he said quietly. Turns out you lived long enough to save the whole country. Rebecca let the words pass through her without catching on anything. She nodded once. Keaton joined them. Phone pressed to her ear, then lowered it. Justice moves? She said. Not fast, but forward. It was the closest thing to comfort she ever gave. Reporters waited by the barricades outside. Microphones rose like a field of black flowers. Headlines had already named her what they needed: the soldier back from the dark. Rebecca stopped at the rope line. I can't speak to sealed matters, she said, voice firm but calm. The record stands on its own. Questions piled anyway about reinstatement, about duty, about vengeance, but she didn't let them stick. A sedan took her to the airport under a gray sky that threatened snow. Washington slid away in streaks of concrete and glass. She watched the city vanish without regret. 2 days later, Ashford came back into view, small and certain against the plains. The wind carried the smell of pine and cold iron. The iron lantern stood where it always had. Door scraped, sign steady. She unlocked the bar and walked in without turning on music. Dusk glimmered in a shaft of winter light. The room waited the way rooms do for the person who makes them work. By evening, people found their way back. Not all at once, and not with speeches. Mayor Brooks mumbled about the weather and took his booth. Martha claimed her stool, gaze neutral, hands folded around an untouched glass. Some patrons spoke to her with a care they had never used. Others watched from a distance, learning how to look at someone new without losing the old shape of her. Respect and uncertainty found the same table. Daniel Mercer arrived after closing bell, uniform covered by a dark jacket. He didn't sit at first. He stood by the corner of the bar like a man deciding whether to step onto ice. Then he took the stool. "Years I figured you were just the best keeper of secrets this town ever had," he said. Turns out that was true and not nearly the whole of it. He kept his voice low, as if the walls could still gossip. Rebecca poured him a club soda without asking. "Both can be true," she answered. "And both still are." The exchange felt like a door closing on a storm and latching clean. They spoke little after that. Words have gravity when life has weight. He finished his drink. She wiped the counter. The place remembered its own quiet. Cole dropped by one last time before returning to his unit. He didn't linger. A hand on the bar, a rare smile, a sentence that needed no reply. "If you need a team, you won't have to ask twice." Keaton's message arrived near midnight. A single line on a secure phone. Charges filed. No sealed deals. Rebecca read it once and powered the device down. The line between her two lives stayed where she put it. The town adjusted by degrees. Someone fixed the crooked step on the porch without leaving a note. A box of pastries appeared at the back door with no card. A kid asked for water in a whisper and got it with a wink. Rebecca stocked bottles, balanced the ledger, replaced a cracked pane in the back window. Ordinary tasks fit like old gloves. Extraordinary had somewhere else to be for now. She kept the hard drive in a small safe that no one could see. Its purpose had shifted. Its threat had not. Insurance isn't noise. It is quiet that refuses to sleep. No banners hung from lampposts. No speeches filled the square. That wasn't Ashford's way, and it wasn't hers. Dignity lived here in small acts and closed doors. On a clear night, she flipped the sign to closed and turned the bolt. The street was empty, snow squeaking under her boots. Her breath lifted and disappeared into a sky so sharp it looked new. She walked without hurry, hands in her coat, the town wrapping itself back around her like a well-worn jacket. Windows glowed warm as if nothing in the larger world could touch them. Maybe that wasn't true. Maybe it was enough tonight. At the corner, she paused and looked up. Stars scattered across the dark and clean, cold light. Silence settled without weight, the kind that steadies rather than presses. How many of us live beside someone carrying a story we never see? How many pass an invisible hero and only learn the truth when it's almost too late? And if their story finally comes to light, is the world willing to listen?